So I'm Stephen Thomas, and I'm a professor in our School of Public Health in the Department of Health Services Administration and director of the Maryland Center for Health Equity. And with my colleague Dylan Roby and our department chair, Louisa Francini, you're going to see my leap of faith, which is doing this thing in the first place. I live in a world of NIH-funded research. I'm just going to be honest and tell you that I had a bad attitude about undergrads because we need people to have skills and work, and we didn't have time to train them up. So we were way on the postdoc side in running our research projects. But I must say that after this, I have been completely transformed. The other thing is these methods. It's very hard to talk about these methods to other people who haven't done them. They think you're just having fun. And so I was able to see what we call the disciplinary arrogance. Oh, you're having fun. But in my class, they sit in a row, and I talk to them, and then they give it back to me on the exam. That's really a university class. So I think Dylan and I are thinking about how do we bring this into the graduate program? How do we bring this into our research projects? Because I think there's real power in the methodology. You have two pieces of Post-it. On the yellow one, that's the pre, just write down what you see. So the other thing I'm going to talk about some of the lessons I've learned in doing this. The other thing, I used to think that when I walked into a classroom, I was the smartest person in the room, at least on the topic, or else are they coming to this class. But I realized working with Mira, Erica, the team here, that kind of academic, professorial directive is what I had to give up, and it's anxiety producing. But as a result of this, and we did 2 semesters in a row, we were only going to do 1. We did an academic year of this. 40 students have gone through this, and now I'm convinced that we're all the smartest people in the room. And while somebody might think there's a contradiction, the method has taught me that there are no contradictions, just different perspectives. We can get to the same place by different routes, and it's all good. So if you value every idea, if you value everyone's opinion, then there's no wrong answer. So this class is about redesigning healthcare. There's a real thing out there. A family donated a 2-story, 12,000 square foot building to the Archdiocese. Long story short, the Archdiocese asked us to help them transform it into a clinic. And our whole point was, if you could start from the ground up, why would you build your great-grandfather's clinic? What would it be to reimagine a health facility? And so what we did is put this course together, submit it for the competition, and lo and behold, we won. And here we are, and we're the better for it. We're the first course from the School of Public Health that has been accepted into the program. So redesigning healthcare to meet community needs. Now we've done a lot of, we brought a lot of videography, photography, the iPhone cameras to try to capture the dynamics of what happens in that space. And this is a story that was on the front page of our School of Public Health website. And if the technology works, I'm going to put you on the bus with the students and take you out to the site. The name of the course is Health Services Administration 484 Fearless Idea Course, Redesigning Healthcare to Meet Community Need.
We're going down to the Mona Center just to get a feel of the community and do interviews to see what the community would like from the Mona Center.
We expect to get an insight on how people, what people think and what their needs are that we can achieve through Mona Center.
So here we are in Temple Hills, Maryland, just outside the Capital Beltway, near the DC line, and one of the parts of Prince George's County that has health statistics that give us pause and concern.
So I'm Dr. Stephen Thomas. I'm a professor in our Department of Health Services Administration and director of the Maryland Center for Health Equity. And welcome to the future home of the Mona Center for Health and Wellness. And there will be full service primary care in this facility. And right now, as you can see, we're on this hard parking lot that's paved. But then there's an overflow parking lot that's grass. And it's a little, almost an acre of land that will be turned into healing garden. And so one of the things that we're so excited about is being able to have a facility like this in the community where we can bring all the science and technology that the students are learning on campus and actually put it into practice.
So I'm hoping that the students are able to engage with the community and learn really kind of what the unseen, perhaps some of the more hidden needs of the individuals in the community.
Part of this is, again, telling the story through the lens of the people who live in the neighborhood.
Design thinking is a human-centered design process. So it's basically a process that starts with exploring the needs of people and communities, and then designing solutions for what needs they have.
Many people were uninsured, we found out, or just, even if they were insured, their co-pays they thought were too high. I talked to a salon owner who took her daughter to the doctor and it was still like $50 for a copay, and it was just a sick visit. So that's something that I learned that deterred a lot of people from healthcare.
How long have you been in here?
I've lived in this area all my life. I'm 48 now.
I think one of the most important things they're learning is how to listen, how to show empathy, how to do active listening, and then how to bridge that gap between people who have and people who have not.
So when we put this together, we did not know at the time. We basically did a little commercial for design thinking, because and you know, I don't know if you knew how that would all play out, but in that little short snippet, if you were talking to someone who didn't understand what this was, they kind of get an idea of some of the magic that can happen. That was from the first group. Some of the students in the first class did not want to leave. So they came back as guest speakers in the second round. And so this is one of the students from the first class. I may need your help on technology here. She is describing what happened when she went into the local bakery shop. And the people thought she was Mexican. And they started speaking to her in Spanish. And what they told her were things that those English speakers would have no idea. Now she comes back to this semester sharing what she learned with the students. Hit it.
Were some of the Latino markets, and that was my first go-to. Like, okay, I'm gonna go in there. And funny enough, you know, when I went in there, they thought I was a customer. You know, they'd be like, "Oh, buenos dias," like, you know, how can I help you? And I was like, "Well, actually, I want to talk to you real quick." So that's where I went. That's where I started to build a connection. And the fact that I was able to speak Spanish alone already gave me a gateway into this conversation. So again, you know, I encourage anybody who has that bilingual skill, then please enter your advantage. And if not, you know, don't be afraid to go in there and, you know, try to figure yourself out. You know, just try to engage in that conversation, get immersed in a culture that maybe you're not so familiar with, and that's okay as well.
And so we had a group of Asian students from China. They speak fluent Mandarin. They went into a Chinese restaurant. They started speaking English. That's how they went in, to introduce themselves to who they were. And nobody would talk to them. And then they spoke Mandarin, and the entire room opened up about how this business has faced the downturn of the dilapidated neighborhood. And so, what are the touch points for opening up the conversation? And how do you manage rejection? So, they start on campus, interviewing their peers, and then they go out into the real neighborhood, interview real people who have other things to do in their life. And so now we're dealing with rejection.
So tell me your name.
Jasmine,
Where are you from?
Upbridge, Maryland.
And for people who are not here, tell them where we are, what this is all about.
We are at Temple Hills, Maryland, and we are trying to get the background story of the members of the community as far as the healthcare and wellness and learn more about them so we can get help them later on.
So what was it like out there?
It was cold, it was brutal, and but at the same time it was really fun getting to talk to a lot of different people, even the ones who said no to us. They're all characters in my high school, even though they said no, I kind of helped them laugh at the way they said no. And then the people who did say yes, they were so excited to talk to us, and it made it so much better. It compensated for people who said no.
So say something about they're all characters. What do you mean?
When I say that, it's like everyone has a different way of saying no. Some people like you expect people to just walk by really quickly, or just you know, but then there's some people who are just so ecstatic, like they're so.
Example. Like what?
Example, one dude who we asked if he would be interested, and he just quickly walked by. It's like, it's like, excuse me. But it's when they say no like that, I can't even be mad. It's like, you don't have time. It's all those guys.
I'm a real character. That's cool. So what's your take-home message?
So, one of the things that they came away with is not about them. They're so focused on them when they're on campus. It's all about me, it's all about my grades, it's all about my class. When they got out there with real people, with real lives, they realized it's not about them. And how to take rejection without taking it personally is not easy. So she acknowledged, these are real characters. I've not met people like this before. And then she goes on to describe the people who said yes. Now, acceptance. And the reason I'm using the videos is because I want you to hear the articulation from the actual kids themselves, demonstrating the core principles that we have inside this course. Here's an example of acceptance.
Okay, well, you've just back from the field. What happened out there?
We got a lot of like hard no's for sure, and it was definitely like a stark difference from being on campus where people are willing to give you a mini interview. When you go out there, people are literally trying to live their lives and get their groceries and get to their cars, and it's too cold outside, and they're just they don't want to deal. Some don't want to deal with you. Some are like, I really want to give you this information, but I'm in a hurry, so you can just walk with me. And some are more receptive when they find out that you're from a specific place, like me being Nigerian and one of the women being Ethiopian. She really vibed with that and gave us like our longest interview so far.
What did it feel like to be rejected?
What did it feel like? At first it was just like, that was my first reaction. My very first person that we spoke to was a no. They gave us a no. The very first person we spoke to was an Audi. And she said no to everybody. Some other students came behind us and tried to interview her. And before I got to tell them that we already tried, she was like,
What was it about her that made you even go up to her?
she was a whole elderly woman. So I just, I guess, as a younger person, you always see, that's my grandma. She's going to be more accepting of me. And that wasn't the case.
But that did not deter you?
It did not deter me at all. We interviewed we went up to another person who also gave us, we got 3 no's before we got a yes. 3 hard no's in the same space before we got a yes. Yeah, so it did not.
So your big take-home message is what?
Persist, be determined, don't give up, and as you're getting more interviews, definitely try to allow your mind to keep coming up with questions, and in the middle of a conversation, carry on the conversation and try to ask you a question, like don't be so focused on getting questions answered, be more focused on getting stories told, and getting that information.
That's good.
Don't be so focused on getting an answer. Be focused on getting a story. And that's one of the core themes in design thinking, getting the story. They came to this on their own. In my old mode, I'd have a PowerPoint slide about getting to the story, and I'm realizing that there's a natural intelligence that gets released in the methods. I think that the other part is that getting them out of their comfort zone, getting them off this campus, getting them involved in something that's actually real, that's going to change the lives of people that are, in some ways, much more vulnerable than they are, far less privileged than they are. Then they recognize their privilege. They recognize their privilege. And the last one is I've titled Life is Beautiful. Now, you've seen the people you've met so far. Now meet Abby.
say your name.
I'm Abby. I'm learning.
So for the people who have no idea, what are you doing here today? Where are you?
I'm in Temple Hills, and I'm here for a design ideation class that's helping construct a free health center that has free healthcare, free dental care, and other services.
So what were you doing out there today?
We were interviewing people in the community and just kind of gauging their experience with healthcare and trying to develop solutions to some of those problems.
So you practice on campus, I understand.
Yeah, so we conducted surveys and interviewed some students around the campus to kind of find different health solutions that we could add on to where.
And so now you came out to the real world.
Yep.
Now I want you to just talk to me about the compare and the contrast.
I actually feel like people were more open to talking about healthcare here than necessarily on campus, because I feel like people actually have more problems in this community out there rather than they do on campus, because on campus everybody has insurance, so that's not really a problem, and access it's not really an issue.
So you talk to people today that have problems?
Yes, so we talked to a couple of different people. We went into a dental office, and then we went into like hair salon, and then conducted different interviews.
Come closer. So keep talking. What kind of problems did you discover?
So there were problems with insurance coverage. That was a major one, especially it seems like a lot of people in the community were a lot older, and so they were having not all the procedures that they necessarily needed were being covered. And then we also found like barriers to language. So so one of the members of the community, she had problems communicating with different people because she spoke Spanish and was really she could speak English, but it wasn't.
So what I wanted you to see is the depth that they got into. I call that one acceptance because all the others have rejection. And Abby's just this bubbly person. It's like, who can say no to Abby? For my instructors, I would say, do you think race has anything to do with it? This is predominantly minority community. And so many of the minority students got rejection. Abby got mostly acceptance. That would be something that we would explore as faculty in the dynamics around race and ethnicity. And so the other very interesting thing about the course is the diversity in that classroom. If you were to see the classroom, it is so diverse, it's actually unbelievable. When we forced it, well, I won't say we forced it, we put them in teams. They don't know each other, they have never met each other, and they have bonded like they've known each other the entire time they've been here on campus. And so, when you mix it all up, shake it around, and come to the end of the course where they give their final presentations, on the first semester, it was, the students were describing a transformative experience. And they described it in a way that even Dean, the man who created all this, with help of everybody else, wondered, maybe this is an anomaly. Maybe this is like self-selection, and we've gotten this first group of choir members, and the rest of the student body, it won't work like that again. And I would say to you, Dean, and Minu and Erica and those who have been in will tell you that it's happening again. And I think it's the method. And I think it's the real world touching of real people. What they're doing will have consequences. And they're describing things like how they're using design thinking in their everyday life. We don't even have that as a learning outcome. So now we're going to just take you into the first semester's closing class reflection.
I'm just kind of curious what you plan on kind of doing with students, like, you know, with design thinking or just with the Mona Center for like future semesters, because I think this is like probably one of the most like rewarding classes I've ever taken. I think it's like, I'm constantly talking to my friends words about this course and like how like much I'm learning from it, and I can like definitely reflect back on this like later in the future about like what I've learned. And I think it's such a rewarding experience outside of just, you know, from the first day you said like we're very happy to give you guys all A's, but like that's not really the point of this course. It's not just about the grade, but just simply about what you kind of take out of it. And I think there's like not enough like courses in college that really focuses on that. And
Floor is open.
I just wanted to reiterate, thank you so much for guiding us through this process. There were times in the design thinking process where we were frustrated, we had no clue what we were doing, we were drawing faces when we weren't supposed to. And it was really you three that kept coming around, talking to us and guiding us through, well, think of it this way, how could this be improved in that way if you reframe it in your mind? And that's really broadened my perspective on how I think about the design thinking process and innovation in general.
The comments, you guys have all been in other classes.
so this wasn't the first time I've been introduced to design thinking. It was like my first semester as a freshman in like my public leadership course that we had like a very short design thinking activity, and to be completely honest, I thought it was a little baloney. but like the idea of like having an entire course dedicated to it and going through the process, and you know, in the first one little course I took my freshman year, it's not really gonna make me really understand the process and the amount of thinking and the frustrations behind it. I think like now I can appreciate it to a higher level, and now I think I can even see myself incorporating it when I'm thinking of like new ways to tackle issues in the professional field. So thank you very much for that.
I drop them. I'm out. Made my day.
Got that in there. Floor is open, yes.
I think that whole brainstorming idea, like you said, like bringing in the whole money, like is not an issue thing. It hasn't only helped me like in this setting, like it's also helped me like to figure out what I want to do career-wise. Like, so now I think of it like I'm sitting there and what do I want to do, and then I just bring in like these constraints, and it's definitely like in the beginning. I remember on the first day, like we introduced ourselves and you guys asked us what do we want to do, like once we graduate. Like throughout the course of this course, actually, like I've changed because of the way you guys made me think, and like it solidified my like wanting to go into social work. So like in the beginning it was more like I wanted this position because I want like money and like, you know, like all of that. But then once we put in the constraints, like it brought me to this point where I really want to go into social work, and it's thanks to you guys.
Compliant, because you've been trained to just listen and write down and take notes and give it back to us. The ambiguity in allowing them to get there on their own, there's a certain amount of academic professorial frustration with that, but I have, in witnessing it, it's much more powerful, and it was reflected in your final presentations. Whatever we do moving forward, there's a certain magic in this. The combination. I mean, look at the diversity of this group here. The combination of you. Whatever we do going forward, we don't want to break it.
Well, I would like to thank everyone for this experience as well. I want to say that this experience challenged me, especially because I feel like I'm more of an in-the-box type of thinker. So this process was very stressful at first because it caused me to brainstorm. It's not something that I would typically do. If I was in a group setting, I would allow everyone else to do that, and then I would help the actual implementation. But I enjoyed this experience because from all the things that I've learned, it changes like even my everyday routine, like how I think things through. Like even when I'm talking to my family, I was like, well, how can we, well, there's a, it's kind of annoying for them, but like, I learned a lot. So I just want to thank everybody for this experience.
I just want to say this was easily my favorite class this semester. Without being as stressful as some of my hardcore science courses, I think I learned most out of this class. I had no clue what design thinking was coming into this. I was like, what is design thinking? I didn't look it up after class. I was still like, I don't know what this is. And I really thought of myself as a creative thinker, but after this class, I definitely feel like that has grown. So I just want to thank everyone. This is a great class.
I never thought of myself as a creative thinker. I changed my career trajectory. None of these things are in our learning objectives. And so that's what I say, mean when I say that this is a powerful tool. So don't treat it lightly. The young man who said, "Oh, I had a little introduction in a class. I thought it was hokey and baloney," that you know, they could leave with that as a permanent impression in their mind about what this really is. So there's something about the full immersion. Dean, I think there's something about the tactile out in the neighborhood, out in the community. There's also something about it. We're not trying to design the new Uber. We're not trying to design the new iPhone. We're actually trying to save lives. I think that takes students to a whole different kind of level of motivation for learning. There's a lot of materialism out there. And we can get at some of the core values of what it means to come back to the university, what it means to contribute to society without hitting them in the face with it. This is what I love about this method. It is so indirect. It is so get there on your own. And yet they actually all get there. That's what amazed me. They all got to a place that we would say, this is the reason why you come to the university, to make a difference in the world. So, on your other piece of paper, I want you to write down what you see. Not existential, not a trick question. And I'll just have you call out from the very first slide on your yellow sheet. What did you write down? So what did you write down on your yellow sheet? What did you write down?
A box of Easter eggs.
A box of Easter eggs.
Ordered chaos.
Ordered chaos.
Ball pit balls. Ball pit balls.
Pit balls.
Colored balls.
Colored balls.
A room full of ideas.
A room full of ideas.
Skills.
Okay? Now, what did you write down on your red one? And what do you see here?
Purpose.
Purpose.
Smiles.
Smiles.
Inspired students.
Inspired students. I would say one of the things is to learn to see perfection and imperfection. Learn to see perfection and imperfection. And that's what I learned in the methodology. There is no wrong answer. And so if you look at this again, with no colors, my eye automatically went right there. This little thing that doesn't fit. A piece of paper someone dropped on the floor. And when I come back to here, so it's not about imperfection, it's about what you see. My eye automatically goes right here. This is the person who looks more different than everybody else. And what I'm saying to you is that to not see that is a kind of color blindness in a sense. That is exactly what we don't want in terms of empathy and understanding. So I've had Nora come to the class, immerse herself because there are other Muslim students in the class. They do not all wear a veil, but they do cover with a scarf. And what she has been able to observe, and I'll let her maybe speak for herself in a moment here, is how to take some of this back to a society that is very much, when the professor walks in the room, nobody talks. And everybody listens. This turns that dynamic completely on its head. So it's not about perfection, imperfection, it is about seeing difference. It's like, how could you not see that little piece of paper down there? How could you not witness who's different here? And yet, in many ways, when you hear them talk, they all have a version of this kind of unique difference. Nora, you want to say anything about your reflection?
On the field, to interview people. Actually, I learned a lot from this class. Hopefully, I get all of this idea, take it back to my university, which I will teach there.
So she's
Yes, no.
she's a professor at her university in Saudi Arabia, where she will go back. A very, very different structured society, but they need this in a way of breaking through kind of some of the cultural dynamics. So I think that this is a very, very powerful methodology for change. And I want to thank you guys for letting us be part of it. I think it would have been impossible had we not had the team of experts in there with us, because we were doing our own professional thing. We're only now learning how to let this thing go on its own. But I would say to my other colleagues, take it like really, really seriously. You can turn on or turn off the students' enthusiasm for the method and how it's presented, and it truly is transformative. So let me stop there and take any questions that you might have. My faith in undergrads has been renewed.
So this is an undergrad class?
Yes.
So what made you decide to do this, to teach this class? Did you teach
That was my leap of faith. I've never
taught other undergrad classes before? No.
Well, no, I taught HLSA 300, which is Introduction to Health Policy. 100 students in a room, theater style, and
Health insurance, Medicare,
we're out
all
in the
the exciting
front.
stuff.
What motivated you to do this? Did you see the ad for the Fearless courses?
We saw the ad, we saw the $4,000 or whatever it was, and we were doing this project, and we got our heads together and said, what if we pitch this to the Fearless Idea Group, and maybe they'll bite. And they came and they helped us structure it, and we came on board. And I'll never forget, Minu, when you were presenting. It was actually in class. I hope I'm not telling on you, but it was in the normal class, the regular class, and at one point in the class, her voice broke. She got choked. Slow moment, like a whisper, but I noticed it. And when I probed her, I said, "What was that about?" It was like, "It's working. It's working." And I was recently presenting at the digital something conference here on campus, and presenting some of this, and my voice choked because this audience kind of had no idea, and then when they witness it, they see how powerful it is. So it's also very emotional for you as an instructor. If you don't have your whole self in, they know it. You've got to be all in order for them to be all in. And some of the colleagues saw the drawings that they did, which I love those drawings. They're like, what is this, a kindergarten class? So they immediately go to, how can I unravel this thing? That's not really a class. And then you realize that we have to do the video capture, we have to do the documentation, we probably need some pre-post follow-up survey work to capture long-term change and certain cognitive processing and worldview. I don't know if any of that's built in, but I think if we do that, we're able to really kind of validate this in the context of this academic environment where there's, you know, rankism and other kinds of things that might marginalize this methodology.
So why did you take it? Why did you take all those pictures and video?
Well, part of it
What
is...
he does, generally. Like anywhere we go, selfie time with Steve, lots of tweeting.
Dylan knows this. Part of it is when we're out in the community and we come back to campus, there are people who have been here 18, 20 years, and they've never been in Prince George's County, per se. Drive on campus, they live in Annapolis. So we're a school of public health. So part of it is to expose them to what this county looks like. And at some point, the Mona Center will be done. It'll be nice and shiny. And we'll forget the mud on our boots when we walk through the field. We'll forget the walking through the construction site with our hard hats on. And I don't ever want to forget that. So in time, we'll have this arc. You guys call this innovative arc. We'll have an arc of the whole process. And in that arc will be the different cohorts of the Fearless Idea class and how many of their ideas actually got implemented. We want to be able to show that. Funding, sustainability, and other kinds of documentation. And the other thing is, I don't think that these typical student evaluations, I've just gotten the email about the evaluations, can capture what you just saw. Other questions? Yes.
I found it interesting in one of the comments, I think it was in the reflection at the very end where they were talking about how the course was, and she's, one of the participants, I don't know her name, but she said something like, this was such a change from my typical hardcore, science and math class. But that assumption there implicitly assumes that doing this is not hardcore, right? It's kind of built, that's kind of an unstated assumption, and it kind of comes back to the thing you said at the beginning where your colleagues come and they say, oh, this looks like a kindergarten drawing or whatever, right? So I guess, to me it's never really seemed easy. I mean, it can be kind of hardcore, but I guess defining what we mean by that might be useful as a reframing exercise. Think about, if I'm going to introduce this technique, what's the hardcoreness of design thinking that is difficult that I need to demonstrate to that, right? Because especially for the engineers that I teach, right, I kind of face this in spades, even more so. So trying to figure out what is really the hard part, and making them see that, and the difference between kind of shoddy work and good work is important. And I still haven't put my finger on what that is. So I don't know if you have any insights from that, or.
Can I take a stab at some of that? Is that okay? First of all, it was awesome that Steve was recording everything, because we got some of the student reflections, and it's much more powerful seeing the face and hearing directly from them. But the person Fong who said, I got 2 weeks of this when I was a freshman, to be honest, so it was baloney. We didn't get the full thing where he went on, and he said, I have other classes, this is the class where we really didn't care about the grade. He talked about, how transformational. He talked about, he was really compelling. He said, I want to go work for Medicare, Medicaid, but healthcare policies, all of it, often about numbers, and he just went on and on about how this connected for him, what he really wants to do and how he's going to do it. But he was also the same person who completely blew it off early on. So just hearing that from him, I think, helps answer some of this question. I don't really care what you think of it to begin with. The point is, we're trying to give you a tool so you can end up where he did. And also, I had a lot of time to think about this, so I have this really profound answer to this question of what do I see here. I see a mirror of us. Because we all have, all right, I'm a professor in school of public health, or I'm the, so-and-so, but we all have these stories, and we've all had these connections to different levels where we've been able to do something really cool because we got past the assumption of the title, and the same is with that group. And I wanted to point out the person on the right there in the blue pants, he's a chief medical officer at Medicare, Medicaid. And he was doing the field interviews. He offered some observations that were really insightful about a really quick one. He was noticing when we walked into the Mexican grocery store that they had the equivalent of Pedialyte, but it wasn't called Pedialyte, it was in whatever the Spanish was. And he was pointing out that, you may have some volunteer doctors in this clinic who are sort of your Harvard medical school white doctor, and they write, you should go get some Pedialyte, and write it. And he's like, some of these people don't speak English as their first language, and they get the prescription, they just nod because the Harvard doctor says so, and they can't find Pedialyte anywhere because they're looking for something with PED, and it's right in the store around the corner, and they don't even realize it. So he was just kind of pointing out that's something this community health center needs to address. And so hearing the chief medical officer of CMS, of Medicare and Medicaid, of the entire Medicare and Medicaid system in the country, say this is exactly what you need to be doing to improve health care, and here's an example of participating, I think is also very powerful in answering the question that you just raised of, this seems like kiddie stuff. But
so it's kind of like leading from good example. You have prominent people that other people respect doing it, and so they say, because XYZ person who I respect is doing it, I believe it, right?
Well, I also think, we don't do a good job of capturing the bad points, but last week in class, we actually made them do, so the first semester, they only did one prototyping session for this project. So they have 3 different projects, and they did 1 day of prototyping. And we were like, this isn't enough time, we're gonna act something from the syllabus. And so this time we had them do 2 days, one here on campus and one in Temple Hills. And I had a group that was like, they did not understand their user anymore, they didn't know where they were going, they realized they hadn't done enough empathy building with that user, and they couldn't go back to them now. So I think if you show people that struggle, it can be more compelling, because they're like, how are we supposed to fix this? Now we have to go test this on people in Beltsville, or how can we go back and find that user? And they start realizing the rigor in some of the defining and empathy steps that they probably just thought, hey, we're out here talking to people and we're going to create some cool new app. And that's kind of probably the stereotype they walk in with. Like, I'm going to do some cool, innovative stuff, but they don't realize like what it takes to actually get it done.
So like examples of like good, bad,
yeah.
poor.
I mean, if you saw, I don't know if we have if it's easy to share the Vimeo of like their actual presentations from last semester were amazing. And so they struggle, and we're like, I don't know if they're on the verge of tears, but they're upset. And then they spend all this time the last couple weeks of the quarter or semester, and it's not a midterm or a final, but it's really hard. And then they came out with these like, they might as well be at Google or Apple making presentations.
Or TED Talks.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
Yeah. So the quality of the outcome is really good. So maybe that would be helpful as well. Like we showed a lot of the process, but not necessarily the actual presentations, which were pretty compelling.
But I also say to you that when that's said to you, it's not about you.
Okay.
And therefore,
I don't take it personally, yeah.
And therefore, it doesn't matter that they're not there yet. So I think it's not easy to not be about you, particularly if it's your department chair or someone that's saying that to you. So some of this is part of that validation, but you actually do have to believe in that. We had a group come back, they were really excited about their new iPhone app. They prototyped it, as Dylan said, out in the field, and they ran into somebody. And when she took that photo, the entire room cheered because they were watching these kids help this woman. And they came back to the bus, in a sense, transformed by, we took so many things for granted. We took our privilege for granted. We got to get really, really basic here to make these things really work. And that's why when the class is over, they don't want to leave. In some ways, there should be a part one and a part two to get over the initial kind of stereotyping that they come in with, and then let them have a more advanced session. So the advantage of the Mona Center is that that facility is not going anywhere. And Dean, we literally could build in a part two for the actual service delivery activities going on in the actual health center itself with real people. Other questions, comments, observations?
I just want to make a time check. So it's 1:30, so if anybody has to leave
We're at the witching hour?
meetings or
Ooh, and nobody ran and nobody pulled out their clothes.
You're welcome to stay also.
That's a good sign.
I'm going to have to run, but I just wanted to thank you for sharing that amazing story with us. And I think that one of the reasons they don't want to leave is you've delivered profound learning to them. And these students have a real thirst for that. And I think we all can do a lot more of that here. So thank you.
Last thing I'll say, we had someone, one of our teacher in the class last time, our guest, what was his name? Tom. And Tom says, I asked him, well, where are you doing this? Well, I teach here, I teach at this lab, I teach at this studio. He's going all over the places doing these things. And I asked him, I said, well, why don't people come into the University of Maryland to learn? And his comment was very interesting. We're relatively new in the world of designs and studios, so they don't quite know us yet. And I said to myself, I'm going to talk to Dean and say, around this particular project, this center is tangible, where you can go out and kick the tires and see it happen, we could bring people around the country here to see how this works. Because this would not happen without the leverage of all the partners. This building was donated, the Archdiocese is involved, there's multi-million dollars involved here that we didn't have to raise. We can leverage that into a whole design experience for people around the country. So with that, I'll say thank you very much.